Welcome to the Culture and Sports Podcast, where we have discussions about how leadership and organizational culture impact organizational success, team and athlete performance, and the short and long term mental, physical, and emotional health of athletes. The Culture and Sports Podcast is brought to you by Culture and Sports. Culture and Sports helps sports organizations, teams, coaches, support and front office staff, and athletes understand the importance of leadership and organizational culture and its direct impact to success. Please join Robert Boland and Dr. Jeremy Piasecki in this season of the Culture and Sports Podcast. Welcome back to the Culture and Sports Podcast. I have an incredible guest for you today, Dr. Patty Raube Keller. She's the Sports Administration Program Director at Boston College. Patty, how are you doing today?
Hi, Jeremy. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Can you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I grew up in New Jersey. I played, a bunch of sports growing up. I was a lifeguard and I wanted to play college soccer and I was a goalkeeper. So I knew that if I wanted to play all 4 years, that Division 3 or 2 would be a better option for me. So I wound up at Greensboro College in North Carolina and I was the starting goalkeeper for all 4 years there. I also wound up playing lacrosse there. Our lacrosse goalkeeper tore her ACL my sophomore year, like the last game of the season in the soccer game, and then she also played lacrosse. So then I went up playing lacrosse. I loved my time at Greensboro College. It was amazing. It was a small school, so I was allowed to do a lot of things that most people probably weren't allowed to do as a 20 to 21-year-old. I was out the athletic work study in the athletics department, and it was just our athletic director and me many times. So I was running game management by myself, doing budgeting with him, helping him in all kinds of roles. And, when I went to college, I thought I was going to be a homicide detective. I was majoring in political science, criminal justice, and then wound up switching to PE because at the time in the 90s, that was the only thing close to sports. I didn't want to be a PE teacher, but that's what I had to do kind of the next couple of years as I taught PE. I also was an athletic training major. I was a head athletic trainer at a very large high school in North Carolina, and through working summer baseball camps to make more money, I met Chip Smith, who was the baseball coach at Campbell University, and he brought me over to Campbell. I was a grad assistant in compliance and student athlete services, and I fell in love with that. I love helping people, so the student athlete services side was great for me, and I think my passion for crime and stuff with compliance, even though compliance is education based, but you are doing investigations and stuff sometimes. So I did that. I earned my master's degree at Campbell. And then my dad got really sick, so I had to take any job I could get. I wound up with a glorified internship at Rutgers and loved my time there. I learned a lot. I was like the administrative assisting intern to like the head AD was Bob Mulcahy at the time, Kate Hickey and Joe Quinlan. Kate's still there. Bob unfortunately has passed away, and Joe just retired from Columbia. So I learned a lot from them in a very short period of time. Greg Schiano just started coaching at Rutgers for the first time there, and saw the inner workings of how it all ran in a big Division I school. And then I didn't have health insurance, so Rutgers Camden, the D3 Rutgers, they had the assistant AD job. I interviewed and applied. I was probably the youngest assistant AD in the country. I was like 25, 26 years old. I was there for 2 years. We won the softball national championship while I was there. We installed turf from a amazing U.S. soccer grant, all kinds of things. So it wasn't a good fit for me, and I wound up moving down to Rowan University, which is a D3 school, state school, but a little more my fit, I think. And I was able to learn from some really great people there. But while I was there, we had a lot of football players that probably should have went D1. They didn't get through the eligibility center academic-wise, and they were playing at Rowan. So I was trying to work with them to make sure that they were academically eligible, they were getting great education. Many of them were marginalized black males, so I rounded up the few black males on campus. One of them happened to be Dr. James Coaxum, who ran the education leadership program at Rowan. He went to Harvard, and he's like, "You need to get your doctorate." I'm like 30 at the time. I'm like, I'm not. I said, "Look, I was a B student. I was a good student, but not getting a doctorate." He's like, "No, it's about how hard you're willing to work, and you do that." And he said, "You're really young." He goes, You could be an AD." And at the time, like, not many females were ADs, and in Division 3, there was more opportunity there. But if I wanted to be an AD, probably getting my doctorate would help me get to the chair. So I earned my doctorate, and while I was earning my doctorate, I met my husband, who was the strength coach at Penn. And then we got married, and John had a heart attack, so we wound up moving to North Dakota. I worked at a Division 2 school, University of Mary, and they had just switched from NAIA to Division 2. And one of my tasks while I was there was not only to fix the compliance because there wasn't any, they were NAIA, was to add a women's sport because they wanted to add men's ice hockey. So I did tons of research. We added women's swimming. They're very successful now. It's Bismarck, North Dakota actually has one of the best pools in the country. So, and their men's club hockey team is doing awesome too. So, two things I helped get going there that I'm really proud of. And, you know, I learned a lot all through that. And while I was there, my husband and I became foster parents. And I was teaching a lot at UMary. I had the doctorate. Many people didn't. So I was teaching classes in sports management over on the education side. All my degrees are in education. And I was the director of PE and health while I was there. So my boss, Roger Thomas, who coached football at University of North Dakota for 30 years, he was going to retire. And I was like, all right, this is the time to make a change. So I went to University of Cincinnati and taught at UC for 5 years and did a lot of work with the Reds, the Bengals, the Western Southern Tennis Tournament, things like that. And then I was going to go back to athletics. I was actually a finalist to be at 80 at like 4 schools, and BC headhunted me to come run their Masters in Sports Administration program. It's a new program. This is my 4th year here in BC's program, full-fledged as a master's degree itself is probably 4 years old. So that's all my experiences. I mean, it's I've worked every level, Division 1, 2, and 3, high school. So I have a unique perspective on seeing college sports.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, Patty. You were recently at Culture and Sports' annual leadership summit as a panelist. Can you tell us a little bit more about the panel you were on and why it's important to you?
So I was on the college sports panel. What, coaches need to know what's the next generation of student athletes that are coming in. I currently have a 15-year-old that is very determined to play Division I volleyball. And, from as a parent, and this is the second year that I haven't coached club soccer now in about 20 years. So the student athletes that are coming into college sports are expecting something different, a much different experience than what I had and even what student athletes had 5 to 10 years ago. With the court case coming down now, with name, image, and likeness, students are already coming in with name, image, and likeness deals. So some of these athletes are making more money than the president of the university. It's insane. And I think there's a little bit of entitlement with that. And, you work for me instead of you're part of a team and it's a privilege to be on this team and things like that. So, but I also think there's a lot of opportunity. Students are a little different. Even just with coaching my kids the past couple of years, I used to yell across the field as a soccer coach, like to that girl playing all the way on the outside. And she's like, why? And that was normal. Like I would yell because she wanted her to hear me. Well, now, the past 5 years, the girls come off the field like, why are you yelling at me? And I'm like, I'm yelling to raise my voice, I'm not yelling at you. And I've had to learn that I had to take the girls off the field, talk to them, make and then put them back out there, which for me, I didn't want to take them off the field. I never wanted to come off a field as an athlete, and these athletes are okay with that. So there's a whole different mind perspective and shift and things like that too, with how athletes perceive even coaching and their playing time and things like that. So my concern is everything's in the news is about Power 5 schools, our big Division 1 sports, football, men's and women's basketball, ice hockey because we're at BC, but there's 390 Division 3 schools and another 200 some Division 2 schools, and then you have NAI in there too, and junior college athletes that are playing sports because they love to. Maybe they're just not as talented as those other people, and they probably most of the time have put in the work in just as much as everyone else. And I think in this whole conversation, especially with the media, we're forgetting about these other athletes and these other divisions. And for many schools, Division 3 and Division 2, those athlete populations are a majority of the population of their students on campus. They rely on those student athletes to come play whatever at their school because for Division 3, they're paying tuition. And the Division 2, those kids on a partial scholarship money. So with cutting out the national letter of intent deal, I'm thinking of my Division 2 athletes who say a school costs $25,000. They were signing a national letter of intent for $10,000 and getting another $10,000 in academic aid. But that national letter of intent, that was guaranteed $10,000 because of athletic aid, and no one could change that. You could sign it for multiple years now. And those kids are not getting the $100,000 name, image, and likeness deal. So what is going to protect them now? And so if student athletes do become employees of the university, I think of as an employee of the university, I've worked at 7 now, the things I get as an employee, I get health care. I have to pay for parking, like all those things, retirement plans, thinking about like my retirement plan is TIA, CREF, and Fidelity. Now, do those student athletes also do they get those things too? Is that, which could be a windfall for some Division 1 athletes working with maybe Fidelity, like now investing all their money in Fidelity as a retirement plan, which could be a good thing, I think, for many of those students, because I don't know what they're doing with their money, some of them. But all those benefits that student athletes get if they become employees of the university is not just getting paid. Or if they contract employees, how's that going to work? Do they get moving expenses to come to college? Like all those things you think about. But I think the big thing is we pay taxes on our salaries, right? And right now, student athletes who are getting a cost of attendance check could anywhere range between $6,000 and $10,000 a semester, right? They're not getting taxed on that. And then they're not getting taxed on their tuition. So if you go to a BU or a Boston College, which is $80,000 to $90,000 a year, now you're getting taxed on your scholarship too. So I think there's a lot of things that people really need to hash out and really educate the student athletes on what could be coming down the pike here, and how money affects us quite a bit. And then I really try to educate our student athletes, especially at BC. I'm like, do you know how much your athletic trainer makes? Like they make 60,000 tops. Like that's the going rate, and that's in Boston. I'm like, and they're working 80 hours a week, and your strength coaches, the football ones do make a lot, and the basketball, but the other ones, they don't make that much, and they're with you 24/7, 365 days a year, because now you can train all year long. Like, I think a lot of people see what the AD's making and what the football coach is making, but no one's seeing that all the people that support the student athletes, academic advisors, athletic trainers, the strength coaches, the marketing people, the fundraising people, they're not making that type of money, right? And many of them were student athletes. Like me, I was a Division 3 athlete. I walked out of college with like a 90 grand college loan bill. I just finally got my, paid off my student loan. I'm 50 years old. So, I've always had to have another job, even working 70 hours a week. I was working another job. That lifeguarding skill came in handy for a long time. But I think there's a lot of nuances that people don't understand about college athletics that they just assume, especially people outside of our world, and that until you're in it, you cannot imagine all the nuances that are going to happen with just one court case. Right now, if athletes can be paid, right? All the other things that go on to that, and I think there's some opportunity there. I mean, just how name, image, likeness created opportunity for people to start new careers and new avenues of revenue, and student athletes were getting paid all this money, but there's been a lot of downfalls with that too. Student athletes are now getting harassed on social media and sports gambling a lot. It's pretty bad, and most of them aren't reporting it. Their mental health, I think the pressure that they have to be these TikTok sensations too, because that's how a lot of them get if they're an influencer, they also get the money because people follow them. They're not under the radar anymore, and in 4 years when they're done playing, and if they do accumulate all this money, but are they saving it? Like, did they really earn the degree? I would really love to see some of this Alston money, some of this national letter of intent money, or it's going to be name and likeness. I would love to see us paying student athletes for their grades. I really would, because what is the motivation to get a college degree right now if you're a student athlete? Like right now, I think some of them are picking the easiest major ever, which they were doing that before, but just barely staying eligible. Where I would love to see some incentive for some of these kids to get really good degrees. Like even in finance, if they're getting all this money, let's teach them how to manage it through a finance degree, or maybe like a nonprofit. They set up a nonprofit with their money and things like that. There's so many things that I think we need to be more aware of, but it's also the bandwidth. Who has the bandwidth to do all this? Like, you're adding more athletic department staff members for name, image, likeness. They're taking away athletic department staff members in other areas because they don't have their budget isn't any different. Right? It's probably even less sometimes, because now some of the money that used to get fundraised to the college itself through development is now going straight to the student athlete. So there's a lot of things that in college athletics, good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to change, but like, how fast can we keep up with the change? Academia is usually really slow at change, and
Right.
with the court cases and things like that. And then, all these high school kids, coming in and, that signing day, which they'll still sign an athletic aid of agreement, but are they going to be also signing like a contract with the local car dealership too? Is they're part of their signing day? And then what about those D2 kids? Now they're signing an athletic aid agreement that can be canceled at any time. There's no protection in that, right? So with Division 2, if you get a new coach that comes in and decides without the national signing letter of intent, they can just decide, I don't want all these recruits and I'm bringing all these kids with me that I had at my other school. So,
Right.
some of the transfer rules have changed in the past 5 or 6 years with if a coach changes and things like that. But then I think student athletes are losing some of the protections that they had with the national letter of intent. It wasn't perfect by any means, but in my world, the Division 2 and then the smaller Division 1s, that really protected many student athletes. So, I mean, I used to tell student athletes, don't sign this unless it's at least 25 grand of your scholarship. Like, some people just wanted to sign for $1,000. I'm like, don't, because then you're bound to the school. If you get a better offer, you're stuck for $1,000. So, it's also
Right.
being smart and being educated about it. But there's a lot going on. And, how do you, right now, I know I sit in the stands with high school athletic parents. They have no idea what they're talking. You hear them talking about recruiting and all kinds of stuff. And it's hard not to comment. Half the time I have to keep my mouth shut, but they don't know what they're talking about, and they all think their kid's going to go play Division 1 and get a full ride, which isn't true. So, and then they look at these name, image, likeness deals, and parents are like coming to campus and asking for $1 million for their kid even to go on a visit. So, some of that's super unrealistic, and I think people are taking advantage of the situation. I think we're losing the mentality if they earn it to get it, too. So I would love to see that student athletes have to earn their money on the field. Like, we get some high school kids coming in, but we've seen it through years. Kids can be superstars in high school and be a bust in college, and then you have kids who, they're not all that great in high school and they become a superstar in college. So same thing with the pros. So there's a lot that I think it's going to have to be broken down and looked at and digested. And every school's their budget's going to be different, and I think for some of our smaller Division 1 schools, this could tank them. We've had many schools like in our area, Stonehill and Merrimack, move from D2 to D1. Will they be able to afford to? They're barely making it now, D1. Are they going to be Division 1 now? Do they go back to D2? So maybe a lot of these little schools might have to go back to D2. And I think Division 2 is going to really have to take a hard look of a national letter 10 for themselves and things like that.
So recently, right after the annual leadership summit, national letter intent, additional guidance, and rules came out. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the national letter of intent, when you signed your athletic aid agreement with the school, you also signed another document called the national letter of intent, the NLI. So you signed them at the same time. And you couldn't sign the NLI without the athletic aid agreement. You can sign an athletic aid agreement without the national letter of intent. So what the American College, it's the American College Conference, AD Conference supervised the national letter of intent program, right? Well, they just decided we're wiping away the national letter of intent, but you can still sign an athletic aid agreement with your college. So say, I'm getting recruited by Rutgers, right? And I'm going to play volleyball there. I would sign an athletic aid agreement with them. Still do that, right? People still have signing days, but that's not really bound by much, right? They can, depending on the wordage of the athletic aid agreement, it can be canceled really for any reason. I'm not really protected, and then say I'm a superb volleyball player and part of my athletic aid agreement is also signing a contract with Jersey Mike's, right? Jersey Mike's is gonna sponsor me. That's part of the athletic aid agreement, and you would sign a contract there for your name and likeness deal. So you saw with the quarterback that left Holy Cross and went to UNLV, they told him it was, we're gonna give you all this stuff, but nothing was ever signed. So they're not holding to it because there's nothing to hold to. You didn't sign anything. So that's the thing. Like, I tell students all the time, get it in writing. As a compliance officer, I have a conversation with a coach and tell them, don't do this, right? On the phone. Back then I get on my laptop and, or on my phone and type an email and say, per our conversation we just had 5 minutes ago about A, B, C, and D, I told you you cannot do this. Because that covered my butt, right? That we had the conversation. That we talked about it, and I told you, no, you can't do this. It's the same thing with signing a contract for any deal. You're not just going to buy a house without signing a mortgage and a contract to buy. So why would you sign it? Like, when I get hired for a job, I sign a contract. So you have all these athletes who are not signing contracts, and their coaches are promising them things, or their collectives, and then they're not holding the student athletes, to them because there's nothing to it. And if you remember, a lot of these collectives are run by alumni who are big time alumni. Many of them are attorneys, right? Or businessmen. They know what they're doing. They're taking advantage of these student athletes who are just coming from whatever that, like, how do you not sign a contract? You got to sign one.
So do you think that, because talking with a lot of, people, especially in the, realm of law, a lot of them are like, oh, this is bad for, the NCAA and the institutions. Things should stay the way they are. Oh, this is good for the athletes, all these upcoming changes because, now they have more control of their destiny. They could be considered employees. They could get all these benefits. But it seems like through what we're talking about so far that you're actually concerned about the adverse impact of when they do become employees, and also from these collectives that may additionally be taking advantage of the athletes, where athletes were a little more protected before.
I think the big thing is athletes were educated on a national letter of intent. They knew they had to sign that. They got their scholarship. It was bound, right? The transfer rules were there. I mean, if that there was tons of rules in place, you could file a waiver to get out of your national letter of intent. And a lot of times when I was a compliance officer, I said to the coach, like, look, this kid doesn't want to be here. Do we want to really keep him here if they're going to make our life miserable?
Right.
We just release them, right? We could release them, right? I think it was very rare that we bound a kid to it. It was usually because they did something awful. We didn't want them going to another school, right? But we didn't want them in our school either. But I think now student athletes are going to have, if you're coming out of college and signing a Division I, you better have an attorney or an agent, right? And your agent better be an attorney. I don't know why people are hiring agents who are not attorneys, or at least if they're a conglomerate, there's an attorney in there. Because they need to read that paperwork, right? Who's protecting those student athletes? They need to have an advocate beyond their parents, right? Who's Sweden, who's in it for the student athlete, like reading all the documentation and making sure that everything there benefits that student athlete, right? There's no adverse thing. One of the things, we had a student athlete sign that he had to make appearances. And I said, did you read the contract? We were looking at it. And I said, if you don't show up, you owe them $1,000, right? But that was in the fine print, but no one really read it with them. So I'm like, those are things that student athletes need to be really aware of. They need to be highly educated now, or have someone on their behalf that's super educated, that understands the legalese of all this and demands they want stuff in writing. This needs to be in writing. We are not committing unless everything is in writing.
Now,
that's where the student athlete would be protected. But then the schools, I think the schools always get made out to be the bad guys. Our goal, I've never tried to harm any of my student athletes in any form or fashion, mental, whatever. My goal is always to help them get a college degree at the end of the day and have a great student athlete experience, right? And a great student athlete experience is different for each kid. It's not the same. So, when I have kids come in who wanted to transfer, or just they weren't happy, I'm like, what are your goals? Like, what do you want to get out of this? For some kids, playing football was to make money at the end of the day. They wanted to go to the NFL and they wanted to make money. It wasn't for the love of the game. It was a means to an end. They came out from really bad neighborhoods, not great functional families. They had no money. They saw that as a way of using their God-given talent to make money and to get out of there, right? And to get maybe the little brother and sister out of there. Some student athletes are playing because they've invested all this time and energy for so long into it that, one, they still feel obligated to play, because a lot of it was, I feel guilty to stop doing this because my parents have drove me 100 million miles for how many years, right? A lot of that, it's some guilt in there. And then, it's really their identity. It's who they are. They don't know who they are without that sport being there, right? So that's why they still play. And then there's all the good other aspects, the team camaraderie, the competition, and all those kinds of things are wonderful. And I tell students, athletes, you have to play for you, right? Whether your motivation is different, it has to be about your internal motivation to play the game, to love the game. At the end of especially girls, if they're not playing, they're not staying. And that's where I used to work with our coaches and be like, look, we got some really great girls on your teams that we know they're not the most athletically talented, but they're great humans and they're good leaders. Let's put them on SAC, right? Because it gave them a role on their team where they would stick around. Because a lot of times those last 3 girls on the bench were not staying. They were going to go do their major, find another club to do, or honestly transfer where they could play. So that's something too. Like, that was my role as student athlete services compliance, was to help support the coaches and supporting these student athletes to have a great experience. Because when student athletes have a great experience, when any student has a great experience at their school, they give back, right? And part of, colleges is scholarships for students to go to college, and you want people to come back and give back and talk fondly of their universities and things like that. So if you're getting paid to play at your university, is there an intrinsic motivation inside you that you just felt connected to the school when you went on your visit, that you really enjoyed the team and the coach, or is it because you want the money? And where is that? Does the money make you happy? Like, many times at the end of the day, the money isn't making anyone happy if they don't feel like they click with the team, they like the school, they don't have their major, things like that. So there's so many things that go in with that. Like, my daughter's looking at colleges now, and she wants to be a forensic nurse. And I said, all right, Dana, you want to look at this school. Go on their academic page. Do they have nursing? I said, okay, they don't even have nursing, so no, we can't even consider the school, right? You're not going to be a professional volleyball player. I mean, she might, but, like, you're not going to be it when you're 35 years old. Like, you got to have a job here. There has to be an end game here, too. So I think there's so many things that parents and student athletes in the high school world need to be educated about. How to protect themselves. The same questions need to be asked when you go on recruiters and visits. My daughter wants to go to Dartmouth, loves Dartmouth, right? We went to watch Dartmouth play UConn. Now, I said UConn's going to kick their butt. She goes, Mom, I want to see how they play when they're losing. I want to see how the coach is coaching them when they're losing, because it's easy to win. I want to see how they react when they lose. So coming from a 15-year-old is pretty cool, but she's been around sports her entire life. But that's something that's important to her. How do they still stay as a team? They still glued together? Do they gel? How do they treat each other? Things like that. She goes, that's important to me. That team's going to be my family. So for many athletes, the team is your family. You think about, some of these deals, you're looking at companies now. They were teammates on the field. How many women CEOs were student athletes, right? All those things. They say because women play sports, they're more successful and many different things because of the confidence building and the camaraderie and the networking. And it's the same thing for men and women in both avenues. So, college sports was about the competition, but about the team camaraderie and being a part of a team and something bigger than yourself. But now is it about, how big of a paycheck can I get?
Yeah, no, that's... those are a lot of important things that you brought up. Now, so protecting athletes is a huge thing. You've been in all aspects of collegiate sports for the most part. You have a child who is in sports and is looking to go into collegiate sports. There are some conglomerates and law firms that you would think as a athlete that those would be safe organizations to go to help protect, your athlete, or as an athlete yourself. But some of those organizations are out to make money. Like,
Absolutely.
I forget the organization. There's an organization, I forget their name, but basically they're using an actuary or something to calculate what they think the athlete's financial income would be, and then they're offering 1 or 5% off, in advance, and that's all they get. Are all lawyers, and all family members and all athletic departments and all NIL collectives there to support the athletes, or are there situations where it could be dangerous and actually adversely impact that athlete, not only financially, but, mentally, physically, or emotionally?
I don't know anything specific incidents, right? But there's always dubious people. I mean, I've worked with coaches who are dubious, right? They're always just towing that line just a little bit too close. So, and that's the thing, like, a lot of them are charming, and they're all the things that the boyfriend that you love in the beginning, and then at the end you're like, how did I see this? And that's where I think people have to be careful and investigate who they're getting in bed with, right? With some of this stuff. Like, are the people the attorneys you're hiring, are they alumni? Say you're looking at Syracuse. Are they alumni of Syracuse? I would really dive into that. Like, are they loyal to Syracuse, or are they loyal to you? Some of those things. This is where other people have been recused from cases because of their involvement and too close and things like that. I would ask for, who are your other clients? Can I talk with them? Like things like that. This is a whole new world. Clients are like probably 3 years deep. So it's not like you can get a
Right.
big, you know, looking at how they are. So, but people need to do their research. And unfortunately, some people don't know how to do research. They're naive to doing it. They're just like, so excited. And we have just people in this world that just, they're just nice people, right? They're not well educated. They went to high school and I think they just sometimes hope that people have their best interests at heart because they're a little naive. And I would hope everyone would have everyone's best interests at heart, but I'm 50 years old and that doesn't happen, right? So I think that's where those people get taken advantage of. And unfortunately, we have student athletes coming out of some major programs in our country that are high school students that are not well educated. They've been passed by. They don't have analytical or reasoning skills, and they can't do it themselves. And that's where I think people see that, and they're going to take advantage of that.
And where I know this is all new uncharted territory, but where can athletic departments and universities and colleges help, or is it one of those things where now with all these changes it would be a conflict of interest if the college or university tried to assist the athletes?
I know, like, when I worked at Rutgers, we had a couple basketball players that could sign deals with the NBA, and they could talk to the law school professors at Rutgers about things because they weren't agents. They were just there to give them general advice, which was nice because they couldn't talk to an agent at the time, right? They would have lost their eligibility. And that's where I think, like a lay person can call the NCAA and ask questions and get answers about NCAA rules. Student athletes can call them. They have phone numbers, right? Is this where we need to have our own little, like, through the NCAA or through another nonprofit is something that helps vet things out for you? Right? Is that something that we're going to need to have? We have it for coaches who do sexual abuse and all those kinds of things. We have Safe Sport, so maybe we have something similar or even started through Safe Sport that's for vetting out some of these agents and things like that. I mean, to be an NFL agent, you have to get approved by the NFLPA and take a test and all that kind of stuff. Like right now, anyone can be an NLI agent. Anyone can run a collective. Even with compliance and state rules and compliance, there's a couple like master's programs in NCAA compliance. Like we have a sports law class that's also NCAA compliance, but no one teaches you. You're not like, you learn that on the floor doing it. So
Right.
this is the same thing. Like is there a certification process that we have to look at doing that people are certified, they're vetted, like all those kinds of things? I would definitely want that for my child. I'm just not going to sign them up with any Joe Schmo. I've been at places where people are trying to become NLI agents and they don't even have a college degree. And I'm like, some of these people are super fantastic marketers and they're influencers themselves. But I hope that there's someone on their team. There's some legal person there, right? So in order to be, like I talked about, our athletes have to be protected, and some of that is, protect us. I think there's people out here that care that maybe we have to come together to form something to, have a vetting process for these student athletes where they can come to us and say, this is where people are reporting bad things, and like we keep a list, and then even when I was a professor at Cincinnati, we used to meet once a month as faculty, right? And you had kids cheat. I'm dealing with it now. Kids cheat, right? So I'm kind. I'm usually trying to work with them like it was a citation thing or something, right? But then when you get all 8 faculty members together and that same kid is cheating in all your classes, right? Because we talk about it. I'm like, okay, they're like, it's not, he knows what he's doing here, right? Or grandma has died for the same student 17 times, right? So that's where I think there needs to be a group of people coming together to vet some of these people, and there's a list and we're looking at it, and that's where you can say, all right, this collective, we've had 8 student athletes burned by them for whatever reason, right? There needs to be an investigation into the collective. Is this the NCAA's job? Or is this another nonprofit group that is approved by the board of presidents? Many people don't know how NCAA rules are made. They're voted in by the college presidents for the most part. So is this something where we have to look at that? And I think, looking at the news headlines and people commenting and stuff, I'm not sure college presidents are too thrilled about paying student athletes too. So, but there's a lot of expertise on a college campus that you could use some of these outside faculty. We already have a faculty athletic rep that's supposed to be helping monitor the athletics department, but maybe you making a faculty athletic board that's just for name and likeness deals.
No, that's def those are some great thoughts on what you're talking about, because it is difficult to understand what the future is going to hold, right? And so in the end, whether athletes become employees or they stay athletes or they're student athletes or whatever the term is, they still are students at your school, or we're assuming they're still going to be students at your school, and you do want to protect them, whether they're an employee or a non-employee, just because it's the right thing to do, right? Like, that's what your thought process would be, is we still need to protect the athletes.
Yes, I mean, once a student comes on the campus, there's inherent risk there, right? That the college takes under their belt that they're going to do right by the student. But also some of it's protecting them, some students from other students. We have Title IX issues, harassment, all that kind of stuff, but from faculty. And so does this become part of that role of a college? Like, we have places where kids can go for mental health or for health center and stuff like that. Do we have a clinic on campus for kids for, deals? And even at BC, I know there's resources for student athletes who live off campus, like to deal with their landlord and tenant, because that's a big thing at Boston College. Like, kids have to live off campus, and tenants take advantage, especially of students. So, like, there's a resource at BC just for that. So is that something that some of these schools are going to have to enact?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think it's a little bit difficult because for universities and colleges, once you're trying to protect athletes from things that are even remotely outside of the sphere of their student experience, like if a student comes in with already created NIL deals before they even step foot on campus, how are you supposed to protect students from things that were from before and that you didn't have a hand in, or you couldn't advise them before? And some of these could be really bad deals.
Yeah.
Where
Or
does it
some
start
a
and
deal that
end
they
with
have that
colleges
goes
and universities?
against a mission statement of a school or a company
Right.
that they're not using, right? So is that when, you go to recruit that kid and you find out that they have a deal with so and so, and you're like, you know what, you can't come to our school because that deal is against everything we stand for at our university, right? So,
Right.
like, BC's Catholic. So if there's a company that a student is using that probably maybe it's a birth control, right? I don't think BC would be too happy with that. So there's things like that student athletes have to be aware of. Like, and I tell our students, like, if you're signing with a company, you better research it. You better believe in their values and what they stand for, and everything, those things, because at the end of the day, you're now the face of their product. It's Ted Lasso had an episode. It was one of the soccer players, right? And it was one of the airlines, and this particular soccer player is from Africa, and the airline was, helping engage in civil war and things like that. So they actually, the whole team no longer endorsed that airline. That was a huge loss for the team as a sponsor. But, like, they backed up their player. So that's where, too, if you have a student athlete that has certain rights or privileges as who they are as a modularized person or something, and a certain company that's one of your big sponsors at your school is, Chick-fil-A, right? They're very Christian and stuff, and they don't believe in LGBTQ and all that kind of stuff. Like, if they're your sponsor and they're going against half your student athlete population, like, does that mesh? Right? So there's
Right.
things, too, I think, on the university side, we're going to have to take a look at for things like that.
Now, you're a parent of a 15-year-old who's looking at colleges and universities. In that role as a parent, what are your concerns for the future of your athlete as they progress into going into college and university with their own decisions? Because even though they're still your child, they're going to be an adult, a legal adult. They're going to make their own decisions, and they could potentially be taken advantage of, whether it's NIL deal or at a college or university. Like, what are your concerns as a parent that maybe a lot of parents might not be voicing?
Well, one thing's, like, even our conference realignment with some of this, like, think about, like, Stanford women's or volleyball is now playing Boston College, right? BC just went out to Cal and Stanford to play. Like, the time they're on a plane, and these are not they're not on a charter jet, they're on a commercial flight. So trying to study and get all their class time in, and then when they're not in class and they're not in practice, they have so many other obligations through the athletics department, whether it's community service, going to financial advising sessions, which yes, they need all those things, but then when is there time for them to study and be a student? So, the student athlete part, I don't know if that's so much, and then you worry about, especially female athletes, I worry, most of the female athletes that you've seen in the past 5 years that take in their life are very type A, strong students it was so much pressure to not fail, right? And then we don't, as parents, it's really hard to let my kid fail. Like, I did not buy a poster board last year because she asked me at 9 o'clock at night and the project was due on Wednesday and she took the F. And I was like, you know what? She's going to learn. This is low stakes. It killed me not to go run to CVS and buy the stupid poster board. Yes, right? And she cried and she got the F, and it dropped her from an A to A minus as a freshman. But I was like, Dana, this is low stakes. You had a responsibility to tell me about this poster board. You had 2 weeks, this summer when we were at Walmart, we bought 10 sheets of poster board. She asked me for it, so we have it in the house. But, those are things that I think, looking down the road that I see people are not letting kids fail. We're making excuses for them. When it gets to college, there's no parachute there anymore sometimes, right? And there's a lot of pressure on these kids. And how do we make that lessen because of all the duties? Now they have to go make an appearance at whatever restaurant because they're their sponsor, right? On top of playing 3 games that week and going to their 5 classes and 20 hours of practice and studying for 2 major tests. How are we making sure we're protecting those student athletes with their time, right? Time is precious. We all know that. And then being a student athlete, you have no time. So how's that wear and tear on your mental health? These kids need to sleep, or they're not getting sleep because they're up all night studying, things like that. Like, living in a dorm is hard, especially if most students aren't on your sleep schedule and getting up at 5 a.m. for weights, things like that. So those are things that do affect student athletes now. So we add in all these other things to it too, that they're pretty much running their own company as a social influencer to have the deals on top of being a student and an athlete.
Patty, thank you so much for coming on today. We really do appreciate it. But before we go, I wanted to ask if there's one thing you could say to any of our viewers or listeners or athletes, parents, athletic directors, coaches, universities, colleges, conferences, the NCAA, or anyone else who's within the college sports sphere, what would it be?
I think a lot of times we react. I think we need to be proactive and having these conversations now, which I know many people are on college campuses, but like, how are we filtering this down to our high school student athletes? And then you have all the club sports too, like those club coaches don't know anything as much as anyone else. So I think it's really important that we create an education pipeline, that we're educating people as the process goes through, so they understand and there's not all these rumors going on or misconceptions and things like that. I think that's what needs to be done.
And that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Culture and Sports Podcast. We hope that this episode has started an internal dialogue, or even one with your team, about the importance of leadership and organizational culture. If you'd like to learn more about culture and sports, the Culture and Sports Podcast, or other programs, go to cultureandsports.com, where there is a wealth of resources, articles, research, podcasts, video shows, webinars, and courses. And don't forget to connect with us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn at Culture and Sports, and on Twitter at Culture in Sport. Thank you for tuning in to the Culture and Sports Podcast.